The Galactic Assembly's decision to exile Earth was swift, brutal, and final. In the sleek, metallic chambers of the Assembly Hall, representatives from dozens of alien races sat, each casting their vote with a sense of detached superiority. For centuries, the Assembly had ruled over the galaxy, deciding which species could join the greater galactic community and which were too dangerous or primitive. Humanity, they believed, had shown its true nature during a failed diplomatic mission to the neutral planet of Varelia. What began as a peaceful meeting to resolve a border dispute between two warring alien races quickly escalated into violence. An unexpected human diplomat, Ambassador Lyle Jensen, had been assassinated under mysterious circumstances just hours into the talks. What followed was a firefight between human security forces and a rogue faction of Virelian radicals who had infiltrated the peace talks. The bloodshed was extreme. The planet's delicate peace was shattered. The Assembly, in its cold logic, saw only one conclusion. Humanity was a threat. A holographic message from the Assembly's council leader, a tall insectoid being known as Tlilo, crackled to life across Earth's communication networks. The Council has reached a decision. Humanity is hereby exiled from the Galactic Assembly. You are no longer welcome to participate in galactic affairs. The actions of your people have shown that you are unpredictable, violent, and incapable of peaceful coexistence. The words were harsh, final. Humanity's place in the galaxy, an ever-growing civilization on the cusp of discovery, was no longer theirs. Their right to trade, to explore, to learn from more advanced species had been ripped away, leaving them stranded in their own solar system. The news hit Earth like a bombshell. People who had dreamed of the stars suddenly found themselves confined to their own planet, with no promise of ever venturing beyond its atmosphere. Governments scrambled to respond, while protests erupted in major cities. Some believed Earth could still salvage a future in the stars, while others feared that humanity's best days had already passed. Yet, amidst the chaos, a small but determined group of individuals refused to let Earth wither into obscurity. Dr. Marcellus Rourke, a former engineer turned visionary, gathered a clandestine council of the brightest minds Earth had to offer. They saw the exile not as a sentence, but as a challenge, a chance to prove humanity's strength and resilience. If the galaxy thought them broken, they would show the universe that Terrans were anything but. In a hidden underground laboratory deep in the mountains of Alaska, Rourke and his team set their plan into motion. The Terran exiles had been cast out, but they would not be forgotten. The exile had left Earth in turmoil. But amidst the chaos and despair, a quiet transformation began. Humanity had been written off by the galaxy, dismissed as a threat unworthy of inclusion. Yet, in the coldest recesses of Earth's military-industrial complex and the secretive laboratories of its greatest minds, there was a dawning realization. They had been given an opportunity, not a punishment. Dr. Marcellus Rourke, once a leader in Earth's space program, now stood as the reluctant architect of humanity's revival. His vision wasn't merely to survive the exile. It was to thrive in it. Over the years, he built a network of scientists, engineers, and former military strategists, all of whom shared a singular goal: to prove that humanity was far more than the violent, unpredictable creatures the Assembly had condemned. They would show the galaxy that Terrans were capable of greatness, and they would do it by becoming something more. Humanity had already made remarkable strides in the decades prior to their exile. But now, with their backs against the wall, the pace of innovation became a mad sprint. Earth's best minds had no more distractions, no intergalactic treaties to sign, no alien political games to play. They were free to focus solely on survival. Rourke's team worked in the shadows, building new technologies that would change everything. Faster than light drives, gravitational shielding, and advanced AI programs began to take shape in secret facilities across the world. The first breakthrough came with the development of Athena, an AI that could predict enemy movements, design battle strategies, and even anticipate future technological needs. Athena was far more advanced than any artificial intelligence the Assembly had ever encountered. She was the key to humanity's military resurgence, an intelligence so refined it could read the subtle nuances of the galaxy's most advanced species, calculating their behavior before they even realized it themselves. But Athena wasn't just for defense. She could analyze vast amounts of data and offer solutions to problems humanity had never dared tackle. Agricultural crisis, energy shortages, climate change. Athena's algorithms began to unlock the secrets of these problems, giving Earth the tools it needed to prosper, despite the galaxy's refusal to help. With new ships designed using Athena's algorithms, the first Terran fleet was built in secrecy. The sleek, angular ships were far more advanced than anything Earth had ever produced. Their engines burned with an intensity the Assembly would never expect, their weaponry precise and deadly. Humanity had built a force not just to survive, but to reclaim their place in the stars. The first mission was a test, an uninhabited planet, a simple survey operation. Yet it was a symbol. As the fleet soared into the depths of space, it carried more than just human life. It carried the future of a species exiled, but not defeated. The universe had dismissed humanity, but the Terrans were about to remind everyone of what they were capable of. Decades passed, and the galaxy continued to turn, oblivious to the quiet resurgence happening on the fringes of known space. The Terrans had been exiled, written off as a relic of an age long past. But beneath the surface, humanity had been watching, waiting, and evolving. The Assembly thought Earth was finished, but the truth was far different. The first whisper of Terran involvement in galactic affairs came from the Outer Rim. A small, independent mining colony was under siege by a ruthless warlord, Voss, who had long terrorized the sector. The Assembly had done little to help, too distracted by internal politics and rivalries. Desperate, the miners sent a distress signal, but no one came. Until, one day, without warning, a fleet of sleek, black Terran warships dropped out of hyperspace and engaged the warlord's forces with an efficiency and lethality that was nothing short of stunning. The battle was over in minutes. Voss's flagship, a massive destroyer bristling with weaponry, was torn apart by coordinated strikes. The Terran ships did not just defeat the enemy, they annihilated them, leaving no trace behind. The message that followed was simple. Humanity does not forget. The miners, who had once resigned themselves to a slow death, were free. The Terran fleet vanished as quickly as it had arrived, leaving no sign of its involvement. Just a small, encrypted token, a symbol of a phoenix rising from the ashes. Word spread slowly at first, dismissed as a rumor. But the pieces began to fall into place. Every time a colony was attacked, every time a planet faced an existential threat, a Terran fleet appeared in the shadows. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't ask for thanks. They simply acted. Entire sectors of the galaxy began to whisper of the Phoenix Reavers, a shadow network of Terran operatives who worked from the fringes of galactic society. They were both feared and admired. No one knew who they were, where they came from, or how they managed to stay one step ahead of the Assembly's most advanced forces. The Terrans had become more than just a force of vengeance. They had become a symbol of defiance against the established powers of the galaxy. They weren't just saving people, they were showing that the Assembly's rule could be challenged. No longer would humanity be seen as the unruly, dangerous species to be ignored. Instead, the galaxy began to see them as a reckoning waiting to happen. Captain Zara Holt, the enigmatic leader of the Phoenix Reavers, became a living legend. Her name struck fear into the hearts of tyrants and warlords, and hope into the oppressed. She had once been a high-ranking diplomat, exiled alongside the rest of humanity, but now she was the face of humanity's quiet revolt. And as her fleet grew, so did the whispers. The Assembly could no longer ignore the threat. The galaxy's belief in its dominance over the universe had been shaken, but not yet fully broken. The Assembly still viewed the Terrans as little more than a nuisance, an exiled species trying to claw their way back into a world that had long since abandoned them. But they had no idea what humanity was truly capable of. When the Virelian warlord, Hadrak Orin, began his brutal campaign across the Midrim, the Assembly dispatched a massive fleet to quash the uprising. Orin, a former Assembly officer who had turned rogue, had been raiding planets, burning colonies, and enslaving entire populations. The Assembly's forces moved in with a typical show of overwhelming force, expecting to crush the warlord's fleet and restore order with the ease they had grown accustomed to. But the Terrans had been watching. Captain Zora Holt, now the leader of the growing Phoenix Reaver fleet, made her move. Her flagship, the Vigilance, slipped into the system undetected, flanked by a dozen stealth ships that cloaked themselves using new cutting-edge technology, an invisible wall of human ingenuity. For the first time, the galaxy would witness the true scale of humanity's power, and it would not come from brute force alone. The Assembly's fleet arrived in full force at the battlefront, an armada of nearly 50 ships, including dreadnoughts, cruisers, and carriers, all bristling with advanced weaponry. They had expected an easy victory. What they didn't expect was the sudden, coordinated strike by the Terrans. In an instant, Holt's fleet dropped out of FTL travel, unleashing a devastating barrage of energy weapons, precise EMP strikes, and wave after wave of small, agile attack ships. The first few moments of the battle were a blur of flashes and chaos as the Assembly's flagship, the Aegis Prime, was hit with a brutal barrage that cracked its shields like glass. Before the command crew could even issue counter-orders, the Vigilance unleashed its devastating railgun, punching a hole straight through the heart of the ship. In the midst of the confusion, another Terran ship, a stealth-class vessel named the Avenger, emerged from the shadows and planted a series of devastating ion charges on the Assembly's supply lines. Within minutes, communications were cut, and entire sections of the fleet were left stranded in deep space, with no way to coordinate. The Terrans had attacked with precision, each strike perfectly timed, each target selected for maximum damage. By the time the Assembly's commanders realized what had happened, it was too late. The Terran fleet, smaller, faster, and more agile, had turned the tide. The remaining Assembly ships were left scattered and vulnerable. In the final moments of the battle, the Vigilance delivered one last crippling blow, taking out the remaining dreadnought, leaving the fleet in disarray. As the smoke cleared, the battle had ended in a decisive Terran victory. The galaxy's perception of humanity was changing. The Assembly had always prided itself on its technological superiority and military might. But now, it had been humiliated by a species they had exiled, a species they had once dismissed as unworthy of the stars. A transmission broadcast across the system, humanity's first major declaration of war. You thought us weak. You thought we would wither. Instead, we rise. We are Terrans, and we are coming. The Assembly was no longer certain of their supremacy, and for the first time, the galaxy began to wonder, could the Terrans really be the universe's new power? The victory at the Midrim was more than just a battle won. It was a declaration. The galaxy's assumptions about humanity had been shattered, and the whispers of rebellion began to spread like wildfire. The Assembly, in its arrogance, had believed that cutting humanity off from the stars would leave them impotent, broken, but what they failed to recognize was the deep, unshakable fire that burned in the hearts of Terrans. Exiled and dismissed, humanity's spirit had only grown more fierce. In the wake of their victory, Captain Zara Holt and the Phoenix Reavers didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. They knew the war was far from over. The Assembly would retaliate, of course, but humanity had something no other species in the galaxy possessed. A drive born from centuries of survival, a history of pushing past every obstacle, and a determination to never be dismissed again. Across the galaxy, oppressed planets began to look to the Terrans for hope. The powerful, faceless bureaucracies of the Assembly had kept entire systems underfoot, exploiting them for resources, subjugating them with taxes and regulations that drained their vitality. Now planets that had long been silenced by fear began to rebel, quietly at first, and then in full force. They had witnessed the Terran victory at the Midrim, and it sparked something within them, the courage to fight back. One of the first to rise was Galactic, a once peaceful agricultural planet under the heel of a corrupt assembly governor. When its citizens began protesting, the assembly sent in shock troops to quash the dissent. But the Terrans were already there, moving in the shadows. A small fleet led by a Terran flagship, the Righteous Fury, emerged from behind the moons of Galactic, and with surgical precision, they disabled the governor's fortress world defense systems. Within hours, the corrupt governor was removed, his regime dismantled, and Galactic was free. The rise of these rebellious worlds didn't go unnoticed. In every corner of the galaxy, systems long neglected by the assembly began to rise up. Whether through sabotage, subversive tactics, or outright insurrection, the oppressed were emboldened. And at the center of it all, the Terrans became both a symbol and a catalyst for revolution. But the assembly wasn't blind. They saw the momentum shifting, and they feared what the Terrans were capable of. It was then that the true scale of the Terran revolt was revealed. The Phoenix Reavers weren't just liberating colonies, they were building alliances. Thousands of ships, both Terran and liberated worlds, began to form a loose confederation, all united under one banner: freedom from the Assembly's rule. The Assembly's response came quickly and decisively. A massive fleet, the largest ever assembled, was dispatched to crush the growing rebellion. But humanity was already on the move. The Terrans had mastered the art of guerrilla warfare, striking quickly, disappearing into the shadows, and reappearing where they were least expected. The Assembly's forces were about to find out that defeating humanity wasn't as easy as they had once believed. The tension in the galaxy had reached a boiling point. The Assembly, reeling from the growing Terran insurrection and their catastrophic defeat at the Midrim, scrambled to maintain control. The rebellion was no longer a series of isolated uprisings. It was an organized movement. Humanity had united its fractured forces and allied with oppressed worlds across the galaxy, creating a coalition that threatened the very foundation of the Assembly's rule. In response, the Assembly's Supreme Command gathered their best tacticians and launched their most powerful weapon, the Celestial Armada. Comprised of hundreds of warships, dreadnoughts, and advanced supercarriers, it was the most formidable fleet ever assembled in galactic history. The objective was clear: annihilate the Terran fleet and crush the rebellion in one decisive stroke. However, the Terrans were ready. Captain Zara Holt, now a living legend and commander of the Phoenix Reavers, had anticipated the Assembly's move. Her forces had been quietly moving into position for months, setting traps and gathering intelligence. The Terrans had long since learned that brute force was not always the answer. What they had mastered was the art of deception. As the Celestial Armada entered the system known as Verena, a remote cluster of asteroid fields and gas clouds, they expected an easy victory. The Terran fleet had been reported in the nearby Paxis Expanse, a known dead zone in deep space. But this was all part of Holt's plan. The Terrans had been baiting the Assembly into this region for weeks. It was a kill zone, and the Celestial Armada had just walked right into it. The first strike came from the darkness. Terran warships, cloaked and hidden in the asteroid belt, launched a devastating attack. Heavy ion cannons cut through the dark like blazing comets, disabling the lead dreadnought, the Imperious, in one shot. The Assembly fleet, caught completely off guard, scrambled to respond, but the Terrans had already scattered into the shadows. Terran stealth ships, equipped with advanced cloaking devices, darted between asteroids and debris, launching surprise attacks on vulnerable supply ships and carrier fleets. The battle escalated into chaos. The Celestial Armada, once so confident in its power, was now a disjointed mess. Terran warships weaved between the asteroid fields, picking off targets with deadly precision. The Assembly's superior numbers and firepower had become liabilities. The once great fleet struggled to coordinate, caught in a web of ambushes and traps. Captain Holt, aboard the Vigilance, issued her final command. End this. Strike the heart. The Terran fleet converged on the Assembly's flagship, the Celestia. The massive ship, a symbol of the Assembly's might, was surrounded by smaller Terran vessels, all firing in perfect unison. Every shot counted. The Terrans exploited every weakness, every blind spot in the massive ship's defense grid. Finally, the Celestia's shields failed, and the flagship was torn apart by a precise barrage of concentrated energy. The Battle of Shattered Skies was over, and the Celestial Armada lay in ruin. Humanity had achieved what no one thought possible. The galaxy's most powerful military force had been broken, shattered into pieces, and left floating in the void. The Terrans, though outnumbered, had proven that strategy and resolve could overcome even the mightiest of foes. The news of the battle spread like wildfire, and with it came the undeniable truth. The Assembly was no longer invincible. The Terrans were not just a nuisance. They were the new power in the galaxy. The victory at the Battle of Shattered Skies sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The Assembly, once the undisputed ruler of the stars, now found itself on the defensive. The Terrans had struck a fatal blow to its pride and power, and the galaxy could no longer ignore the growing strength of humanity's rebellion. The once fragmented Terran forces had transformed into an unstoppable juggernaut. An alliance of liberated worlds, freedom fighters, and exiled Earthborn, all united under a common banner: freedom from the Assembly's tyranny. Captain Zara Holt knew that this victory, while significant, was only the beginning. The Terrans had proved their military might, but the real battle was yet to come. The struggle for the hearts and minds of the galaxy. The Assembly was not simply going to surrender, it would lash out, and with everything it had. Holt's fleet had become a symbol of hope, but also a target. The Phoenix Reavers would face the greatest challenges yet, as they moved to solidify their place in the galaxy's future. In the heart of the Assembly's capital, Rivarth Prime, the ruling council convened in an emergency session. Supreme Leader Tsililo, the insectoid leader of the Assembly, had been a cold, calculating figure. Until now, the devastation of the Celestial Armada had shaken him to his core. And now, he and his inner circle faced a stark reality. Either crush the Terrans once and for all, or risk losing their reign over the galaxy forever. Terrorism, rebellion, and disorder. Slylo muttered, his compound eyes gleaming with cold fury. The Terrans have defied us. We will wipe them from existence. But his advisors knew that brute force alone would not work. The Assembly's military had been humiliated. Their fleets shattered. What remained was a broken, fractured empire struggling to hold onto control. The rebellion had spread like wildfire, and even more systems were on the brink of revolt. If they moved too quickly, they risked losing everything. If they hesitated, the galaxy would see the Assembly as weak. They needed a plan, a final decisive blow. General Zorvok, the Assembly's fiercest tactician, proposed a daring strategy: the use of the Void Spire, a massive superweapon that had been kept secret even from most of the Assembly's own leaders. This weapon, powered by an artificial singularity, had the capability to wipe out entire star systems in a single shot. It was a weapon of unimaginable power, and it was the galaxy's last chance to reclaim control. The plan was set into motion. The Void Spire would be activated, and its target would be Earth, the cradle of humanity itself. As the Terran forces regrouped in the aftermath of their victory, they had no idea that the Assembly had already begun its most dangerous gambit. Earth, once exiled and forgotten, would now be the center of a cosmic struggle for survival. And as the first warning signs of the Void Spire's activation began to appear, Holt knew that the war was about to reach its most desperate and deadly phase. The moment of truth had arrived. The galaxy, still reeling from the shockwaves of the Battle of Shattered Skies, now braced itself for the most terrifying weapon the Assembly had ever created. The Void Spire, hidden deep within the core of Rivarth Prime. The superweapon's singularity core hummed to life, its gravitational pull so powerful that it warped time and space around it. It could obliterate an entire star system in one shot. And Earth, the cradle of humanity, was its target. The Terrans were caught unaware. Despite all their victories, despite the liberation of countless worlds and the formation of an unstoppable alliance, they had underestimated the depths of the Assembly's desperation. Captain Zura Holt, standing on the command deck of the Vigilance, felt the weight of the moment. The Terran fleet, though formidable, was scattered across the galaxy, and Earth, their home, was isolated in its solar system, unprepared for the sheer power of the Void Spire. "We need to get to Earth. Now," Holt ordered, her voice resolute, but her eyes betraying the urgency that burned inside her. The Phoenix Reavers had one shot. They couldn't allow the Void Spire to fire. If they failed, the human race, everything they had fought for, would be erased from existence in an instant. But the journey to Earth was not going to be easy. The Assembly's remaining fleets, though damaged, had regrouped, and were lying in wait to intercept any Terran vessels approaching the capital world. Holt's fleet was outnumbered, and the closer they got to Earth, the more dangerous the mission became. There would be no room for error. In the heart of space, a battle erupted. The Terran fleet, coordinated and deadly, surged toward Earth's atmosphere, cutting through the Assembly's defenses like a hot knife through butter. Ships turned and burned, cloaked fighters danced between asteroid fields, and plasma blasts lit up the dark void. The Terrans knew that every moment counted. They needed to buy enough time to reach the Void Spire before it was fully activated. As the battle raged in orbit above Earth, Holt's ship, the Vigilance, was one of the first to break through the Assembly's defensive lines. With her crew at the ready, Holt issued the command to dive into the heart of Revarth Prime's orbit, where the Void Spire waited. The final assault was swift and unforgiving. The Phoenix Reavers, backed by a handful of loyal forces from liberated worlds, stormed the Assembly's superweapon facility. Against all odds, they breached its defenses. Holt, in a desperate gambit, personally led a strike team down to the heart of the Void Spire's command center. Time was running out. As they reached the core, the Terrans set their charge. Holt faced the weapon she had sworn to destroy, knowing that in this moment, the future of humanity, of the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. She pressed the detonator. The Void Spire collapsed in a blinding explosion, taking with it the Assembly's last hope for victory. The shockwave reverberated across space as the superweapon was erased from existence. As Earth's skies returned to their peaceful, unblemished state, the galaxy knew that the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The Terrans had emerged not just as survivors, but as the new rulers of the stars. Their fight was not over. They would rebuild, not just their own world, but a galaxy united in freedom, no longer ruled by a corrupt, distant assembly, but by the very species they had tried to destroy. Humanity, exiled and dismissed, had emerged as the dominant force in the universe.